This is Brett Weinstein.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Bruce Party.
This is Alex Kreiner.
Hey, this is Brad Wall.
This is Dr. Pierre Corey.
Hi, this is Frank Peretti.
This is Danielle Smith.
This is James Lindsay.
This is Vance Crowe, and you're listening to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Monday. How's everybody doing today? Well, I tell you what, driving into Toronto, although Trish Wood sat at the end of that drive, that was an interesting drive, to say the least, with a trailer on. I don't plan on doing that anytime soon again, okay? But we did get that. Spoiler alert, this week you are going to see Trish Wood a little later on in the week, but regardless, that's coming as well. So this is going to be a fun week, I hope, for all of you lovely folks out there. I also got to run into Earl. Shout out to Earl. That was super cool. He came up and sat with us at the campsite the one night, brought some ice cream for the kids. Kids certainly enjoyed that. And I know the visit I had as well, it was great to finally put a face to the name, Earl. And so appreciate all of you along the road that continue to reach out. And I do my best, or try my best, to get in touch or run into any of you. I did not realize how big Ontario in the lower half was. It's like, oh yeah, no, I can up it. No, I can't. That's like 3.5 hours one way. Oh boy. Okay. Now that aside, you know what I'm going to say. Precious metals, all right? This week I give out the first silver coin. We've got a very small, finite amount of what we're giving out since we're doing so many in person, and so you'll figure out who that is soon enough. Regardless, when it comes to precious metals here, in Canada, or where I'm sitting recording this, looking out on Lake Ontario, just on this the east side of Niagara Falls right now. Or on the United States side. When it comes to precious metals, you know who we talk about. Silver, gold, bull. Of course, them and Bow Valley Credit Union bringing the Cornerstone Forum back May 2027. But when it's in regards to precious metals, buying, selling, or storing precious metals, you can text or email Graham for details down in the show notes. Any questions you have around, anything to do with precious metals, maybe even why would I want to buy any. Graham can help you sort through those questions. It's super easy. You go online, silvergoldbull.ca, silvergoldbull.com. And sign up for an account. Everything ships directly to your doorstep. Now, if you're in Alberta, Bow Valley Credit Union, okay? It's all about lending, deposits, real financial advice. You can open accounts, talk through lending options, and get help with banking, all in a space designed for conversations, not transactions. If you want smarter banking with gold, silver, Bitcoin, sound money, and personal freedom, think BVCU. And hopefully, if we put enough pressure on Brett and the group at BVCU, maybe there will be some locations open up in some other provinces. Here's to hoping. For all your banking needs, Alberta, head to bowvalleycu.com. Now, firearms, Liberal government has its own thoughts on firearms, but when you're looking for firearms in Canada, and, I'm sure you've got your different dealers across all your provinces, but there is one I point you to. That's Profit River. You can go to profitriver.com. They're right from my hometown of Lloydminster, and they ship all of Canada wide. Doesn't matter where you're at. They're the major retailer of firearms, optics, accessories, and they serve all of Canada. You can go on their website. They got brand new. They got lightly used. They got a little bit of everything. And if you're looking for something specific, you can always give them a call. But just go to profitriver.com, and they'll get you squared away. Now, deck season, I love deck season. I love just warm weather in general. And when I think of building things, I think of Windsor plywood. And, I've been hearing different stories across Canada about people using Windsor plywood. The guy I turn to is Carly Clausen and his team in Lloydminster. They are the builders of the podcast studio table. In the new studio, we used Windsor plywood specifically. And whether we're talking mantles, decks, windows, doors, sheds, whatever your backyard project is, head to 3605 51st Avenue in Lloydminster and say hello to Carly Clausen and his team. Now, if you haven't signed up for Substack, okay? Substack, a whole bunch of things have been going on in the last little bit. At the end of every episode, Jack had been on me to do bonus questions. And when I'm doing it virtually, it feels almost cumbersome, but it's been awesome to do in person. So pretty much every guest this week and starting last week, we have bonus questions for paid members on Substack, so you can hear a little extra there. Also for paid members, Mel has been highly sought after to come on the podcast, which she's adamantly said no. People wanted her for the 1,000th episode. But I did convince her to answer a few questions on the road as we were driving about the first month, and that is for paid members as well. So if you go to Substack, you can hear a conversation between Mel and I while we're driving and the kids are doing their thing in the back seat. And so that's another cool thing. We also have Tanner and a Day's masterclass, the life of Paul, going off every Sunday. So if you're looking for reasons to head over to Substack, there is plenty. And then, of course, the episodes air there, the week in review, all free for you to subscribe to if you just want to see what's going on there. If you're listening or watching on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Rumble, X, make sure to subscribe. Make sure to leave a review. If you're enjoying the show, make sure you share it with a friend. And finally, the road trip has been powered by Zeebs, all right? And I feel like I am... Zane is slowly making me into a bit of a technician because I call him again today, and all it was a loose battery screw, plug, whatever we're calling it. See, I don't know the terminology, but I'm starting to know the sounds, and Zane's helping with that because the road trip, the SMP road trip, is powered by Zeebs. Of course, they're out of Chestermere. That's Zane and his dad, Brian. Zeebs Performance Restorations. They're expert classic car restorations, custom exhausts, and performance upgrades that keep your ride reliable and roaring. You can find them at zeebs.ca, okay? That's what I got for you today. I hope everybody's had a good weekend and looking forward to a great start on a Monday. Let's get on to that tale of the tape. Today's guest is a retired entrepreneur and chemical engineer. I'm talking about Faisal Huda. So buckle up. Here we go. Well, welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. I'm joined by Faisal Huda. Thanks for having me in your circle of contemplation.
That's right, the circle of contemplation. Well,
but
welcome.
I was going to say I was the first podcaster here, but obviously Bodrovics, wherever you're at.
Bodrovics beat you to it.
Yeah, Tom, wherever you're at, you came here first. So
he's down in Phoenix these days.
Yeah, well, I heard he's recently married, right?
Recently married.
Congrats, Tom.
End of May, basically.
Yeah, congrats. Yeah.
So I think that's 3 months almost. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, happy for him.
Yeah.
Right? But
yeah.
You bugger, you beat me here. So there you go. That hasn't happened too many places I've gone recently. Now, I don't know. I'm going to start with something that has nothing to do with what we normally talk about.
Sure.
I've been wondering this, every province I go through, there's something I stare at. I'm like, I just don't get it. And the one I've been asking Ontarians is, like, when I come rolling through Ontario, it reminds me of Minnesota. Like, just forest everywhere. Beautiful, humid, like all the great things. I'm like, how did they convince the largest population in Canada per province, right? You got about carbon capture, about we're destroying the environment, all these wacky ideas when you drive 20 minutes outside of Toronto, maybe even less, and you're like right in it. You're like, wow, this is beautiful. Like, how can you convince a population that you're killing everything when you take a 20-minute drive and you're into what I would consider, we always joke, we're God's country, but I'm like, man, it is beautiful to the north of Toronto.
Yeah. No, it really, truly is, especially you get up. And the landscape varies a lot, too. Like, you get up into Muskoka, into the Canadian Shield, a different type of beauty compared to this area that you're in right now, which is extensively farmland. But you're also in the Greenbelt, which is, a wonderful thing. There's been some qualms about what the provincial government has been, how they've been managing the Greenbelt in terms of selling it off to developers and this and that. I don't understand. I won't pretend to understand how it all works, but you're in the Greenbelt, which is one of the reasons it looks so green. Number two is we had a lot of rain early this spring. And so that always bodes for a really nice looking summer. Last year was the same. So our mutual friend Nick, who was actually just here last week and left, he came as well last year. We had Nick, Tom Bodrovics, and Matt Arrett. We did, I don't know what you want to call it, our own little self-made retreat.
Yeah, sure.
And tossed around ideas sitting here in the circle of contemplation. But back then, last year as well, Nick was observing how green it was in this whole area and how pretty it can be. And again, it was a really wet spring. So how do you convince people who live in this space of the the evils of carbon. One, maybe people don't understand how the carbon cycle actually works and that trees come from carbon. All that wood, where does it come when a tree grows? Where does it come from when a tree grows? Maybe they don't know that. I don't know. But I did listen to our first episode, which is already 2 years ago. I listened to it yesterday, and I spouted out this phrase that I like to use. So I'll repeat it. Self-satisfied pseudo-intellectuals. That's the problem with Canada as a whole, but when you're talking about Ontario in specific, Ontario runs the way Toronto sees fit, by and large, right? That's where our provincial government is as well. And that city is full of self-satisfied pseudo-intellectuals, as many big cities in North America are. As probably all of the big cities are full of self-satisfied pseudo-intellectuals. I saw this video that was rattling around on Twitter yesterday, but originally published on Facebook, about all these old self-satisfied pseudo-intellectuals standing in the street singing, I would walk 500, I would knock 500 doors. And they're going on, and I'm like, can you even, like, cringeworthy? The phrase? Like, how cringeworthy is that? If you could hold a mirror up to these people, I don't think they'd even recognize that they're acting cringeworthy, because they're so self-satisfied, and what's going on in their head is intellectualism, but it's pseudo-intellectualism is what I call it. If that's the right phrase for it or not, I don't know, but I think it gets the point across. Just people full of themselves, sniffing your own farts. That's another way. Drinking your own Kool-Aid, sniffing your own farts.
Drinking your own Kool-Aid, sniffing your own farts. It's just wild. Like, since I left Manitoba, hit the western, most northwest part of Ontario, we have not left forest. Like, just dense forest. Is there lots of rock? Sure. Yeah. Is there tons of lakes? Yes. Yeah. But you're in, like, full-on forest. And all I've seen is all these forest fires, devastation, the fear, just pump the fear.
Yeah. It didn't last very long. Like, I smelled smoke out in the backyard here.
I haven't seen
it. Didn't last long either. Exactly.
Faisal, right? I haven't seen
Got
1
under
ounce
control
of smoke.
pretty quick.
Now, in fairness, when we were down in Minnesota, there was a bit of smoke. But I was expecting to go by the highway and just see, like, a stretch where it had been burned for miles to see. Like, I've been a few years ago, I was in Kelowna when the forest fire was going on. You could just see it. Yeah. And so, like, anyways, go across all of northern Ontario. It is absolutely gorgeous in the summertime. Yeah. Nothing but trees, nothing but green. I'm like, when you're out in the prairies, and you're like, we need to plant 1 billion trees. You could kind of look around and be like, yeah, maybe we do need to plant some trees. When you're in Ontario, it's like, where would you even plant them? There's nowhere to plant them. There's just trees everywhere.
Yeah, exactly. The other thing about, where does this self-satisfied pseudo-intellectualism, fart sniffing come from? I think it really comes from a lack of, I think too many people suffer from a lack of meaning in their lives. They don't have a sense of meaning or purpose in their lives. And so it's very easy for them to glom onto something, grab onto something, and ride it for the meaning that it gives them. So we were quipping a little bit earlier about COVID era and how that propagated across the cities and across the country and in total. I think it just gave people a sense of meaning. It's like, okay, here's something we can work on, champion, what was the phrase, the greater good and all that type of stuff. Carbon and climate change, again, similar idea. Just they're false senses of meaning. People don't delve into it deeply and understand why the data is coming out looking the way it is in terms of climate change, I'm talking here. Or really what is the science behind underneath these vaccines, or how does a coronavirus work? How do the waves of coronaviruses spreading across a population work? People don't get into those nitty-gritty details. And then they look at the cause and it's like, okay, my neighbors are doing this and I need to belong. I need to have a sense of meaning. That sense of meaning is contagious, right? Like, you find a sense of meaning, you go after it. Great things are accomplished when we feel like we've got a sense of meaning behind us. But if that meaning isn't real, or isn't wholesome, or isn't virtuous, isn't stress tested for validity, bad things can happen. And I think we've witnessed a lot of that in the last, at least in the last 10 years probably, but for sure longer, I think.
You wonder if people are looking for a sense of purpose, right? Like a cause to get behind.
Yeah, whether they're consciously looking for it or not is a question. I think, though, that meaning is absent, and when they find a reason for meaning, they probably don't even connect those dots in their head that, oh, I'm acting this way because I feel I have a sense of meaning. I don't know if that's a conscious occurrence.
If I go back to the beginning of COVID, I remember thinking, finally, my life will, like I knew something like this was going to happen in my lifetime. I remember right at the start of COVID thinking
Knew something like what?
Important, like world event.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
Before I went down any of the rabbit holes, before I started talking to any of the politicians, the doctors, the lawyers, I just remember sitting there going, I knew we were going to have an important thing happen, because it's that search of purpose you're talking about, or meaning that there's bigger things going on than just you. Mm-hmm. And at the time, I remember that thought very, albeit brief. I do remember sitting there thinking it, and I didn't know what to do with it. But you talk to like old timers, that fought in World War II. Although we're getting further and further away from that, and they said it was the best time in their lives.
There you go. That's probably the most salient, most potent example of what I'm talking about. It's like going off around the world and killing other people is probably not the most virtuous thing you can do with yourselves, with your life. But if you believe that there's a meaning and a greater cause, then it becomes your personal identity. And like you said, some of these people are saying it's the best time of my life, despite all the horror and the gore and everything like that. It's shocking what
it was a sense of
purpose and direction.
Yeah. And it felt like everybody was in it together. I remember hearing that, like everybody was pulling the same direction. They were, and you think of COVID, if you were sitting on the other side, that's what it would have felt like. Cheering on the nurses and all the people that were out there working and everything. And it felt like there was a common thing. It's just, when you're sitting on this side, you're like, what is happening in society? I don't get it. While we were having this conversation earlier, maybe 2 days ago, talking about, like at the beginning, was it a manufactured virus? Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was. So there was people that died.
Well, I think they know that now, don't they?
Yeah, I think so.
What's come out in the last couple of weeks, the Fauci stuff, his
diary and everything.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, that wasn't good. And were there people who got sick from that? For certain. So at the start, can you give a little bit of grace on a few people? Maybe. But not far after that, because eventually it gets to just, like insane levels. Canada is a postcard for how insane it got, and what we did to our population.
Yeah. Do you remember me saying on the first time we sat down for a chat, Canadians will eventually get there?
Yep.
But we'll be the last to limp across the finish line. That's still cool. That still applies, I think, to Canada and Canadians. Nothing's changed. We'll eventually follow along, because the rest of the world will figure it out, and we'll eventually follow along. But
I did see in Ontario the first person in Canada still wearing a mask. So you have that.
Oh, you saw a mask? I haven't seen a mask
today,
in a long time.
Today, as I was getting here.
No way.
Yes,
I was like, were they driving alone in their car wearing a mask?
No, they were walking alone.
Oh, they were walking. Okay. Well, it's dangerous once you get outside of your bubble, like your car. So, maybe they know something we don't, Shaun. Maybe we're the
chuckled.
fools.
I'm like, I don't want to be.
I haven't seen a mask in a long time, actually. So, well, okay. So they're still out there. That said, my nickname between myself, my wife, Nick, and Bodrovix is Indoor Cat. Faisal's Indoor Cat. So what happened, I think I told you this story before, is I exited my business. I sold it. I sold it in 2 stages. Second stage, I was gone and done with owning the business by Christmas 2019. And then they decided they didn't need me for as long as they thought they would need me to stay on, and, so that things didn't go haywire on them sideways. So I was gone by like middle of March-ish, I think it was. I can't remember the exact date, 2020. And I was like, oh man, I'm retired, and I'm don't need to show up for work in the morning, sort of thing. And well, life's good. And then the whole COVID thing unfolded. And so I became Indoor Cat. It's like, I rarely go out, and it's very opposite to the way I was previously because I traveled all over the world. I was gone for weeks at a time. I was always at the office if I was in the country. And then I swung entirely the other way. So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, I'm indoor cat. So
That's funny because every time I meet you, you're outdoor cat then. Because,
because I come out to Alberta to see
Well, you come out to Alberta
Yeah.
and you don't just hop on a plane and go. You drive like a crazy amount to get
Well, that was
there.
the one time. That was 2025 I did that, right? Yeah.
Is that
last
I thought
year.
you drove out twice, just the once?
Just the one time. I'd do it again, but I didn't do it this year because you did Cornerstone in March. And that's not a great time to be
May
driving
next
across
year.
the
We're
mountains.
doing it
and
in
stuff.
May next year.
So you never know. I might drive.
We had to try. I've been trying to get into April. Full stop. April?
Yeah.
April to me makes a lot of sense for a lot of varying reasons. But for whatever reason, it makes a lot of sense to a whole lot of other people too.
Yeah.
Probably the same reasons.
Yeah.
And all the venues are booked up. So
Yeah.
we had the choice between March again or May, and I drove the roads in March, and my wife laughed at me. And I was more stressed about her driving behind me because we take 2 vehicles to Calgary. And I went, I'm never doing that again. And
Yeah.
I know if I get into June, there's no point in doing it in June. So it
Yeah,
went
June's
back to
getting
May.
a bit late.
Yeah.
I like May. May worked.
Well,
great
May
for
was
me.
beautiful in Calgary the first time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Like,
exactly.
So we're going to give it a go in May, and we'll see, we'll wait and see how Cornerstone 2027 goes. I have high hopes for it, but, every year is its own challenge.
2027 already. We're talking about 27 this decade. Because, like I was saying, as everybody is well aware, COVID, late 2019, 2020.
Yeah.
And we're already 2027.
Wow.
Talking ahead
A year.
Yeah. But, that year comes quickly. Like, the first time you started talking about Cornerstone 26, and now it's already behind us. And it doesn't feel like that conversation started all that long ago.
No, well, I remember the first time I think it was like a conversation with Nick. I could be wrong on my, Nick will have to correct me on this, but like I remember bringing up Martin Armstrong, right? Because in the first Cornerstone, Martin was virtual.
Right.
And so the goal was to have Martin come in person.
Yeah.
And, I don't know if anyone put a ton of faith in me that I could pull that off.
Mm-hmm.
But as people are learning out, I'm kind of a dog on the bone when I want something.
Yeah, good for you.
And so having Martin come in person to Calgary twice, and he is, if I'm being fully transparent, the number one guest people want back next year is Martin Armstrong.
Again, really?
Again,
Yeah.
yep. They would, and it wasn't even close.
Yeah.
He was the number one guest that people said they'd want to have back. So, I mean, that's cool too to know. But yeah, the Cornerstone's been an interesting little endeavor. A lot of stress there.
Interesting journey, yeah?
An interesting journey. Calgary's been interesting. I assume you like Calgary better because you've done both.
Oh, better than Lloydminster. Yes, better than Lloydminster. Not because I don't like Lloydminster. I don't like getting to Lloydminster.
Yeah. The travel.
Yeah, the travel is...
Well, I've
because once you're there for the event, it doesn't matter what the city is because you're there, you've got the people, you're in the hotel, whatever, the restaurant, whatever it is, right? It's just getting to Lloydminster's.
Yeah, I know.
Pain
I
in the
mean, we lost
behind.
all of our flights just after COVID. WestJet pulled out, and after that, there was no direct flights from Calgary. It used to be you could fly into Calgary and get a flight right to Lloyd.
No way.
Yes.
Lloyd's got an airport. I had no idea.
I know.
Is it that main street? Is that the runway? Just clear the car. You got that big, long, straight road that goes through the center of town, right?
No,
It's
no.
not the runway.
But
Okay.
but it's funny. I've sat with the mayor. I've told him, you ever want this event to come back
Yeah,
that had 700 plus people in the premiere last year?
you're right.
We need an airport because I hear that from all the people who travel in is like, I
Yeah.
don't mind Lloydminster. It's just getting there.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah,
So-
that was a game changer. Having the airport was right there. What hotel? I can't. Weston was it?
Weston.
The Weston Hotel
We had a
right
shuttle
there.
24/7, all the things.
Yeah,
Honestly, it saved my life, saved myself a ton of stress.
Yeah.
Didn't have to worry about guests. I'm like,
Yeah.
we can all get here. This is
Yeah.
about as easy as it gets.
exactly. Airport shuttle out to the hotel.
Now I'm all over the place. Let's talk. The last
Right.
time we talked, 2 years ago,
Yeah,
we were talking eschatology.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I could even pronounce that word 2 years ago.
yeah,
Since we talked,
yeah.
man, you just got a ton of stuff that's gone on in the world, right?
Mm-hmm.
Obvious things, I think that stand out to me is at the time we were talking about there's more Jew hate out there.
Yep.
And you were saying it feels like they're seeding the ground for it. And I was like, I don't know. I don't really see, I don't, you know, and then I fast forward 2 years and I'm like, no, I would say that is pretty self-explanatory at this time if you hop online. I'm not saying I see it in my community, but I don't have a large Jewish community in Lloyd. So in fairness.
So there's a young guy I know, call it a mentor, mentee relationship if you want, or
Sure.
whatever, just a friendship. It's an awkward friendship. I'm 52. The kid's, gosh, how old is he? 19, right? So that's why I think of it as mentor-mentee. But at any rate, he's Jewish background. And so you say you don't see the Jew hate out in the community. He ended up shifting over, gosh, now, what is it, 2 years ago? Well, he's in undergrad now. So, yeah, this was late high school, to a private school. He would go home to his parents and like, please, can I get out of this school? The Jew hate that he was facing.
Really?
Yeah. So, and I'm like you. I don't go out into the community. I don't go to the grocery store, the gas station, and see it, right? I don't see swastikas or whatever form Jew hate takes. But I heard this from the kid, and I'm like, okay, wow.
Fair enough.
Wow. Yep. Yeah, so he shifted over into the high private school, and now he's an undergrad at any rate. So
Well, I go back to some of the comments made in the last podcast because I was like, well, we were talking about, you know, the anti-Semitism on the rise, and you know, basically, what was it? Problem, reaction, solution.
the Hegelian dialectic, yeah.
Right? And so you go, okay, well, since we had that conversation, I would say it would be safe to say you've had a vilification of Israel. I think that's safe.
Oh yeah, it's ongoing and amplifying.
Well, actually, you have all the all the big heavy hitters of the independent world of the United States talking like that.
Yeah, so who are some of the names there? I mean, Tucker doesn't
Candace.
doesn't express it, but he exposes it.
Yes.
And he may fertilize the grounds a little bit by the way he frames things sometimes. I'm not talking about his intent, but I'm just, as an outside observer, listener. Candace, yes. Marjorie Taylor Greene, she does, right? Certainly he was vilified for being a Jew hater.
I mean,
Thomas Massey.
Shaun Ryan, who I recently listened to again. Gosh, I guess he was on with Tucker recently. Yes, he was, yep.
Yeah. So I think that's where I heard him. And there's so many others as well, right? But
just big heavy hitters. Sorry, Faisal. Just
Yeah.
the big names
right.
have pointed out there's a strange relationship. That, you know, if you look at Tucker, it's just a strange relationship. That's what he's trying to allude to.
Yeah.
But if you tag it on to what we were talking about, this is what was coming up for how you get to Pax Judaica, right?
Yeah. Which, is something that people will hear and go, well, he's clearly got to be a Jew hater if he's using that phrase. But, and these are all thoughts. There's constantly evolving thoughts of mine because I'm generally up in my head thinking through things. And somewhere between our first podcast session and today, it occurred to me that really what Pax Judaica, what I'm communicating, is the move towards that which we've been told about for as long as I can remember in my life, when I started paying attention to the world around me, which would have been probably around grade 8 to high school sort of time frame. It was like, okay, life is more than just home with my parents. This whole idea of New World Order. So all we're doing is moving into this thing that we were told they were working on, New World Order. Why do we call it Pax Judaica? Because it appears that their first course of action, their preferred pathway to the New World Order didn't succeed. So their fallback plan appears to be a synthetic manifestation of Abrahamic eschatology, Jewish, Christian, Islamic eschatology, in order to get there. They're not going to be able to wrap the entire world up in this New World Order as they were perhaps once upon a time aspiring to do, which means wrapping China into it, wrapping Russia into it, wrapping, quote unquote, the global South into it. I think what happened was China Russia, whether independent of each other or in communication with each other, realized where the West was trying to take the world in terms of transitioning into the new world order, and between themselves, or again independently maybe, decided, no, we're not playing along. This doesn't work for us. This doesn't make sense. We're civilizations. We have a different view of the arc of human history. This doesn't make sense to us. We're not going to play. And so I think that's a large part of the reason that we're witnessing deglobalization, trying to keep it as friendly as possible. But, you know, now missiles are starting to fly. Trying to go through an amicable divorce. It's turning into a divorce with friction at this point. I think that's why deglobalization is happening, because China and Russia have said we're not playing along. There's a bunch of smaller countries out there who are looking at Big Brother China, Big Brother Russia, and saying, okay, you know what, we're going to side with you. That's the quote unquote global South. And as we go through this divorce, this deglobalization exercise, in parallel, the West is saying to themselves, okay, I guess we're going to have to go to plan B and run this eschatological playbook and just wrap the Western world into this new world order. And because this new world order is not going to encompass, in fact, the entire globe, because I don't think, come heck or high water, I don't think China and Russia are going to allow themselves to get pulled into it at all. They'll fight to stave it off for themselves. That's why I think ultimately this new world order doesn't succeed. It doesn't become what they hope it's going to become. In other words, what I'm saying is, while they hijack Abrahamic eschatology and foist upon us what I'm calling Pax Judaica, and what many others are calling Pax Judaica as well, that Pax Judaica is going to be short-lived. It's not going to succeed. It's not going to amount to what they think it should amount to. And then you go back into actual eschatology of these three religions, the Abrahamic religions, and you realize that eschatology itself teaches this isn't going to succeed. They're going to try and pull off this thing. It's just not going to succeed. You know, and that's a good thing. That's a good thing for us. I mean, there's a lot of ugliness and darkness that we're going to have to go through as they try and pull off this thing, but it's just not going to succeed. So, you know, years ago when the whole COVID thing started to unfold, I would tell people, I would try and communicate it through social media as well. At that time, I was primarily just on Instagram. I would tell people that, yeah, there's dark, dark days ahead. You think now's bad? It's going to get way worse. We have to traverse this chasm. We're going to descend down into the canyon, and it's going to get deeper and darker. But as we come out eventually on the other side, and I was saying 2030, 2032, that sort of time frame, it's going to be a brilliant future. We're going to have gotten through the worst period of all of human history, and what comes after that is going to be brilliant. And that's really what eschatology actually teaches us.
When you talk about, like COVID, we're going down in this deep chasm. When you look, okay, so here we sit in 2026. We're just talking about, oh man, we're already talking about 2027. Like, I remember the first time I heard Martin Armstrong, 2020, and he was talking about 2032, and I'm like, the heck is this guy talking about? Well, I mean, here we sit, halfway there, essentially, a little over, and I go, man, it ain't that far off. Like, when you look at the next 6 years, right, that 2032, I'm going to stick on Martin's year, like, what ways do you think it's going to get worse?
Well, I think geopolitically, I don't think what we've experienced, endured through the first part of this year, but really started last summer, I think it was, with Iran, I don't think that's done. And the reason I don't think that is because I do subscribe to the eschatological narrative. I do believe, I'm fairly well convinced that this eschatological playbook is being synthesized. It's a playbook that they're relying upon heavily. And if if I'm right, and if that's actually true, then we still have to get through the Great War, right? And I don't think what we've just witnessed in Iran
Is the Great War.
is the Great War. It's not great. It's war. It's not great, though. It's not, and great doesn't mean good. I mean, great means
Yeah, you're talking about
scale.
Scale of it.
Scale and scope. And I don't think, I've said all along, my gut instinct tells me it's going to be brief, it's going to be intense, it's going to scare the living daylights out of us. I'm not envisioning a World War I, World War II sort of thing. War definitely is fought differently today. That's not what I mean. It's not, almost certainly never going to be trench warfare and that type of crap, right? But it's also not going to be long and prolonged. And, while we tend to call it World War III, I'm not even sure all the nations of the world are going to be wrapped up in. I think all the nations of the world will be affected by it, but I think it'll be relatively contained, immense in scale. Intensity is what I'm trying to say. It'll be immense in its intensity, and it'll scare the living crap out of all of us. And the way it's taught in eschatology, specifically Islamic eschatology, is the Great War. In Arabic, the word is the Malhama. Malhama is the Great War. You will see, and all of this is metaphor, of course, 99 of 100 combatants will die. Of every 100 combatants, 99 will perish in the Great War, in the Malhama. So, what could that be? Is it a nuke goes off that causes that widespread death and destruction? Is that the type of intensity and stupidity and foolishness humans must witness again for a second time that scares us and makes us pause? I think so. It jives with the whole idea that a Messiah figure must descend upon the earth to save us from ourselves. So I'm expecting, anyways, long story short, or long story long, I guess, is I'm expecting that the fighting will intensify again at some point. Israel has not suffered sufficiently according to their eschatology. So their eschatology teaches that the world gangs up against that nation, the land and its people. It gets pushed to gets almost pushed to an existential breaking point, but then they are redeemed. They find their redemption. What does that redemption look like? I don't know. I've got ideas. Do those ideas really matter at this juncture? Probably not. It's just me trying to explain to myself what might unfold. But according to rabbis, the deadline for the redemption of Israel is October 2nd, 2027. How they arrive at October 2nd, you'd have to ask a rabbi. But the rabbis that I've listened to, a select few, it's not like they're all out there, announcing this with megaphones, but October 2nd, 2027, which means, all this stuff that I'm talking about, the Great War, if indeed eschatology is being synthesized to play out to convince us, we got less than a year to go through this stuff. So yeah, will it get darker? For me, that's darker than where we are today. My wife is I'm still planning for the future, right? We're not in such a deep, dark situation that, we're holed up and going, am I going to survive, right? My wife's talking about where are we going to vacation next year. I was telling you earlier that my wife and I just embarked on this project to build a home, for a forever home for ourselves. We're talking about the future. We're planning about the future. Thinking and planning for the future is not indicative of the worst darkness, right? How many people in the throes of World War II in Europe were sitting there planning for the future? Where were we going to vacation? What's our forever home going to look like? That's the type of darkness I'm talking about, where we're just like, okay, are we going to make it through the day? Are we going to make it through the week?
Yeah, it would be, one of the questions that we have in the bonus set of questions for Substack is, like if you had a historical person you could go sit with, who would it be? And at times when I hear that question, I'm like, where could I take a mic and go see what people are actually thinking? You think of like London in World War II. Did anybody give two craps about anything going on other than staying alive. It's possible. Or, like the settlers of my area came over, and the stories are roughly 1905-ish. And, like they're living through the harshest things. You think they're worried about what the world powers are doing? It's possible. Probably not.
Yeah.
They're worried about staying alive and keeping their kids alive and all the things that are going on, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like when you talk about we're still planning for the future, in order to get us all not thinking that way, it would have to be pretty rough, Faisal.
Yeah. But again, I don't think it's going to be an extended period. I don't think it's going to be 5 years or 10 years of that type of
the speed at which
trauma.
everything happens now,
Yeah. It'll be brief. It'll be intense. We'll probably get over it in a quarter, half a year sort of thing. Get past it, get past the darkness. People will become traumatized. I don't know what that post-traumatic disorder is going to look like for people, but it will affect people, I imagine. I think we might stop for a good little while talking about, well, where are we going to vacation next year? What addition are we going to put onto the house? How are we going to make our lives more comfortable? I don't think that's all comfortable people talk, right? And it's not that I wish it upon us, but it's also something, if you believe in eschatology, if you're subscribed to your religion, Jewish, Christian, or Islamic religions, it's written. This is going to happen. It's going to happen. It has to happen. The arc of history doesn't complete without this happening. Is it happening now? Some people might argue, no, Faisal, you're out to lunch. You've spent too much time up in your own head. But I think in our first podcast, I explained a couple of factors that make it fairly convincing that no, it's probably, if it's ever was going to happen, it's probably happening right now.
I think of the course of how many interviews I've done where people blame it on the Muslims, but they're not alone. The Jews, the Chinese, pick a group and you hammer on it. You coming from a Muslim background, there's a lot of people, when I go back and listen to it, it just sticks out to me like how easy it was to talk to you about things that should be very uncomfortable. Right?
Right.
So you go well, immigration is a serious problem, it seems like, in Canada.
Yeah.
Because it feels like it's a clash of values. But when I hear you talk about Muslim values, I'm like, how does this get so messed up? And we kind of briefly talked about it right at the end of the first podcast.
Mm-hmm.
Because that is something that it feels like values or different ways of looking at the world are clashing right now in Canada. And maybe I'm just wrong, because I just drove, 3/4 of the way across Canada so far. Mm-hmm. And you know what? Things look actually pretty decent. I can't sit here and be like, you know what? I almost got in 6 accidents on the highway. That didn't happen.
Right.
And when I talked to my dad about, staying in Winnipeg and how dangerous downtown was, he was talking about 30 years ago it was like that when he was driving semi. Mm-hmm. So that isn't, we can focus on the bad. But one of the things that I think is unique about you, it's when you talk about eschatology and the different 3 Abrahamic religions, is it just feels like it's okay to talk about things that are taboo. Well, in our world right now, I feel like a lot of people are blaming everything on the Muslims. Muslims are coming over, and they're going to take over the country, and if we don't stop them, we're in real doo-doo.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so at the risk of oversimplifying things.
I know I have a problem with doing that. So.
No, and I'm going to do the same thing right now, which is why I say at the risk of oversimplifying. This part of the world is, the modern iteration of what the Western world is, right? What this part of the world is, whether it's Western Europe, America, the United States of America, Canada. It was built up by Christians, right? So I personally feel, and correct me if you think I'm misreading it, when the statement is made that the Muslims are the problem. They're coming over here. They're going to change our way of living or whatever. It's by and large Christians who are speaking up out of concern.
I would say it's by and large people who come from Christian
Backgrounds. Yeah. No.
I don't
okay.
know if they're Christians anymore.
They
right?
may not be practicing Christians, but
I can say that I'm a Christian now.
yeah.
But certainly, like I would just say majority of our population, are they practicing Christians? Probably not. There's
No.
a huge chunk that aren't. But
Right.
regardless, yes.
So
Probably from a background.
Yeah, but I guess what I'm getting at is if you gave these people a handful of choices and say you got to choose one. Are you a Jew? Are you a Muslim? Are you a Christian? Are you a Hindu? Are you a
Christian,
Buddhist?
I would say.
It's going to be the Christians who are saying this, right?
Sure.
And so I personally believe that division between Christians and Muslims has been very carefully put together, assembled. It's what's the word? It's a contention. It's a point of contention and contest that has been. It's not rooted in reality. It's not rooted in the truth of what those two religions actually teach. And I'm not going to fault Christianity nearly as much as I'm going to fault Islam or Muslims for allowing this point of friction to actually exist. Because Muslims, I don't know if we touched upon it in our first conversation, but the Muslims have been terrible custodians of their religion. By and large, speaking of Muslims as a whole, we haven't really appreciated and understood what our religion actually teaches us. A good many Muslims will say, well, yeah, Prophet Muhammad was the last prophet, and because he was the last, we are the right ones, and Islam will encompass the globe. It'll be the quote-unquote the winning religion, right? That's not. First of all, what does the word Islam actually mean? That's a question to ask Muslims. B, okay, if the source of your truth is the Quran, show me anywhere, somewhere in the Quran that it actually says that. We talked in our first conversation that what Islam teaches in very clear and plain terms is that what you readers, you followers of this religion, should expect in the future, if you happen to be around at that time, which I believe we are in that time right now. I don't know if I'm going to live long enough to exactly see this, but what it teaches, you should expect Pax Christi, an order in the world that is governed by the spirit and the body of Christ. When his second coming happens, which is exactly what the Quran teaches, he's coming back. And when he comes back, he pushes evil out of the world. He defeats evil, and he creates the kingdom of Christ, right? Which I'm calling Pax Christi. I don't know if anybody has ever conjured that phrase before, but the reason I've conjured that phrase is because if I'm using Pax Britannica, Pax America, Pax Judaica, I guess what I'm talking about when it comes to the return of Christ is, well, let's call it Pax Christi. So that's what the Quran teaches. That's what Islam teaches. And it teaches us, as we said earlier in our first conversation, that those who follow Christ become the custodians and the stewards of this world order, right? Christ will lead. I don't know if Christ lives forever. I don't think that's true when he returns. But, if he only lives for a period of time, it's the Christians, his followers, that become the stewards and custodians of this everlasting Pax Christi, right? It doesn't teach that the Muslims are the ones who are victorious over everybody else, and everybody's going to be praying 5 times a day, fasting during the month of Ramadan, reading the Quran. It doesn't teach that. Maybe some people will, but it doesn't teach that that's what's going to happen, and that's what we ought to expect. But it does teach us that, our role as a people of the Abrahamic lineage through the cousin Ishmael, not through Isaac. Isaac and Ishmael were the 2 sons of Abraham, right? From Isaac came the Israelites bifurcated into the Jews and the Christians. Okay, fine. We tried. We, meaning the royal we, God, tried. Didn't work. Keep getting it wrong. Maybe I can come at these guys through the cousins. All right. Let's enlist the lineage of Ishmael, the Arabs. Let's send them a prophet. Let's get the message and let the cousins talk to each other, and hopefully they can set things straight. And so it's for this faction of people in the world who choose to, apply themselves to the domination and oppression of the rest of humanity. If the real spirit of Islam were actually understood, and if the Christians and the Muslims could unite, ever do unite, which I think they will, in spirit, it spells big trouble for this faction of people who want to dominate and oppress. It means the end of their game. It's game over. And you'll remember from our first conversation, blaming the Jews is misguided. It's not right. I can understand why people do that, but it's intellectually lazy. They haven't really tried to understand the history of what happened. And it's just easy to say, oh, the Jews are the root of all our problems. I mean, for the guys that aren't saying the Muslims are the root of all our problems, the guys who are saying the Jews are the root of all our problems, I understand how you get there, but you're wrong. There's many more layers to this thing. It's worth trying to understand and explore and unpack, because if we allow ourselves to jump back on the bandwagon of let's hate the Jews, all we're doing is helping the quote unquote the bad guys advance their cause. The single greatest thing, it's never going to happen. It's a pure hypothetical, right? Fiction. But if humanity could do the opposite of what it's doing today, which is to turn around and say, okay, you, the Israelites, or the Israelis, pardon me, you, the Israelis, what we call the Jewish people, have done a lot of ugly things in the last 3 years or so, 2.5, 3 years, even longer. Some would argue 80 years, whatever. Done a lot of ugly things, but we forgive you. We understand how you've gotten here. We're not excusing it. We would like you to correct your ways, but we forgive you. Now, can we sit down, unpack and understand how you got here, why you got here, what your own religion warns you against, that if you allow what they call the Erev Rav, the riffraff within them, within their people, to exercise their influence on the rest of the Jewish people, what could go wrong, what your own religion forewarns you against. Can we unpack this? Can we talk about this? Can we understand how we've gotten here? We would avert all of this crap. I don't think it's going to happen. It's not possible for it to happen at this point, because we would have to fight so hard against our own individual sense of humanity, sense of justice, sense of fairness, sense of morality, sense of ethic. We'd have to fight so hard against it to make that happen. Because how do you look at legions upon legions of babies being killed, burned alive, whatever, and say, I'm going to turn around and I'm going to forgive these people? It's not going to happen. I accept that. It's not going to happen. And why do you think all these babies are bombed and burned? Because they want to close the door off to allowing that which I fantasize ought to happen. They want to close that door off entirely. They don't want to allow humans to go back and say, well, in the spirit of Christ, love thy neighbor, forgive your enemy, and all that type of stuff, right? We got to close that door off. We got to seal it shut, weld it shut, so that it can never get open, because we want this juggernaut to move in this direction. This machinery, this project towards a new world order, Pax Judaica, has to move in this direction only. There can be no backtracking. We're running out of time.
I don't know. I assume that you'll agree with this, but I'll just a nice, quick little question. God's outside time, correct?
Yeah.
So when you go like, Isaac, Ishmael,
Mm-hmm.
and when people try through the cousins, I go, that's too simplified because I'm like, he's outside time. He knows what doing that divide is going to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I sit there and I stew on that for so long. Like, why would he do that? It doesn't make any sense to me.
Why would he do what?
Why would he allow Abraham to go his entire life trying to have kids that can have kids,
Yeah.
to then
Excuse me.
having a kid that wasn't with his wife, right? Ishmael.
Mm-hmm.
Then he goes off, and that becomes the line of, that creates Muhammad.
Mm-hmm.
And on the other side, you got Isaac,
Mm-hmm.
right? But it comes after Ishmael, right? Because they have Ishmael before.
Oh,
correct?
yeah. Ishmael's the older brother. Yeah.
Right? And you go, but God knows.
Yeah.
But it's also human beings, like I get that we can never see past the event horizon, if you would, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's just certain things we can't get past,
Mm-hmm.
but God can, and He can see the timeline.
Not only can, but does, because time doesn't exist for him.
Right. So He sees exactly where we're going.
Yeah.
He sees that, like they're going to weld that door shut, and no matter how much I preach that this is what, you should do, they're not going to do it. And that's going to do this, and this, and this, and this, and this. You probably watched a great movie where at the end it ties up all the loose ends. You're
Right.
like, oh my God, what an ending.
Yeah.
I just feel like it's going to be that times a million when we get to the end. And
I
you get to
believe so.
see,
I agree with you, man. I
like,
agree
you're
with
gonna
you
be
about that.
oh,
Yeah.
I could not have seen that how all intertwined. Because as soon as I read in the Bible that Ishmael, and I'm like, what? How? I haven't been able to get my mind around why would he allow that to happen?
Mm-hmm. Well, this gets into metaphysics, and I don't know if I'm nearly articulate enough or articulate at all to be able to explain what's in my head. But, physics and metaphysics has been an area of fascination for me since I was a kid.
Okay.
I read, for example, A Brief History of Time, Stephen Hawking, just out of interest when I was 13, 14 years old. Right. So this is the type of stuff that rattles around in my head. I talk to Bodrovics every now and then. I'll send him a video, like a YouTube video. It's like, oh man, you got to listen to this. And then we talk about this type of stuff. So God existing outside of time. I wonder to myself if that isn't the ultimate destination for all of us once we get past our earthly lives, right? You've heard the anecdotes of people who've had near-death experiences, right? They come back to be able to tell the stories. Their life flashes in front of their eyes. What does that mean? Life flashes in front of your eyes. How can an entire life of whatever, let's say you die at the age of 100. How can 100 years flash in front of your eyes in the fraction of time? Cannot exist. You need to be beyond the threshold, the dimension of time. You need to be, as you said, outside of time for that to happen. So what does outside of time actually mean? I think outside of time, what it means is that you understand the state of everything. You see the before, the now, and the after all at once, which is the state, right? It's like standing way back in an art gallery and seeing a massive painting for all that it is, all at once, right? Versus standing up close and looking at it, and you have to walk the length of the painting in order to absorb it all, right? Like, you're outside of time. When you're zoomed out enough and you're outside of time, you see the entire state of everything. So it's not, for me, it's not a question of how or why does God allow this to happen. It's a phrase that I hate, but I'm going to use it. And I hate it because it's overused, but it is what it is. The state is what it is. Now, all these different souls, all these different human beings that we're creating, the Shauns, the Faisals, the Nicks, the Toms, the et ceteras, we want to test them. We want to test their soul. It's got to be an experience curve that we have to traverse. Let's say we live for 100 years again, right? It's 100 years of experience that we need to traverse. So how do we do that? How do we take this big snapshot of it is what it is, and test Shaun, test Faisal, you introduce time, right? You make them travel, you make them zoom in to that painting and go
live
through
out
it
the first.
and live it out. And are you going to take this pathway across the painting? Are you going to take that pathway across the painting? Choose your own adventure. And now this is where the painting metaphor falls apart, because what's the good path? What's the bad path? Okay. That you can see how the metaphor falls apart. But, what we're taught, if we follow these religions, is, you should probably choose the good path because there's a reward. There's a blessed state at the end of it versus a cursed state at the end of it if you take the wrong path. So yeah, bad metaphor. The metaphor falls apart. But this is what I think when I hear that time doesn't exist. Time collapses. Now, I don't think you and I have ever talked about this, but I was a very square kid growing up. Meaning I played 100% by the rules. If my parents said something and I didn't like it, I still followed it, because I would always go back to, call it my bedroom. I would reflect, and it's like, well, they're older than me. They probably know this is they're probably not doing it because they hate me. I don't like it, but it's probably for my, so I'll follow it. And I followed and I followed and I followed. And it's worked out really well for me. I've learned from other people's mistakes. Could I have made some different choices along the way and done even better? Perhaps, but I'm not complaining about my station in life at all. So I was super square growing up, played entirely by the rules, colored strictly within the lines. I sold my business, get home, take a shower, unwind, relax. My wife, I'm in the bedroom just lying down, just unwinding, right? Wife walks in. So, wow, big day, Faisal. What does the future look like, right? And I'm like, well, I colored within the lines all my life. I fulfilled this thing that I believed I was supposed to fulfill. It's done. I turned to my wife and I was like, I want to do some drugs. She looks at me. She's like, what the heck are you talking about? This is so un-Faisal, right? And for me, it was like, I want to start coloring out the outside of the lines and see what life might look like. Now, I didn't turn into a druggie or anything like that, but the first thing I really wanted to get into was some of the psychedelics. And the only drug I've done, frankly, is shrooms. And my very first shroom trip, and I've only done it 5 or 6 times now, but my very first shroom trip, I ended up talking to Bodrovics afterwards, and I was like, dude, I got some stuff to share with you. I told you that I share with him about these YouTube videos and this and that, whatever. So my experience on that first time and on subsequent times, time collapsed. I call it time collapsed. In other words, time didn't exist anymore. Time was just a structure, like a piece of scaffolding in our reality. And if you eliminate that support structure, that piece of the scaffolding, that piece of the structure, all the other elements still exist. Dimensions still existed, but time didn't exist for me in that experience. And what I took away was I got to see, it wasn't like exactly like some people talk about near-death in their near-death experience, that they got a snapshot of their life, but I saw a heck of a lot all at once. It was just there like a tapestry in front of me, and I understood so much without the obstacle of time in the way, so I could connect dots that I wouldn't maybe not have otherwise connected because they would have been separated by time, right? So, when God exists outside of time, I think he's all-knowing and all-seeing because he doesn't have to endure the obstacle of time, an obstacle that he created, right? For us as humans. So it's not that he allows it or disallows it. It's for him, it's just the game board, right? And I'm going to put these people onto the game board. I'm going to introduce time, and I'm going to see how they come out on the other end. Can they take the guidance and the wisdom that I offered to them through these prophets, Adam, Abraham, Moses, Jesus, Muhammad, whoever else, Solomon, David, etc. Can they take the wisdom and the guidance, or will they shrug it off? He knows the answer, but we don't know the answer, right? Our life is a choose your own adventure, right? This is getting pretty out there. I don't know if you want to rescue me from the fringes and bring it back to the center.
The only thing that I hear is from the prophets, and where I sit, Jesus isn't a prophet. That's, that's the only thing when you're talking, I'm like, I find it very fascinating.
Sorry, Jesus isn't a prophet?
I think of Jesus as God.
Oh, from a Christian perspective. You're right. Sorry. Yeah.
So like when I sit there and I'm listening to you and your meanderings, your thoughts as they kind of pour out, I'm like, I was telling you before we started, one thing I just, in younger life, I wasn't opposed to, once again, drugs. We like, I don't know what people's thoughts on shrooms are, but like I look at shrooms as a pretty minor thing. Now, once again, I don't do drugs anymore. I go way too internal, and I've just had some rough experiences. And so like, I'm happy that probably happened so I don't do more of it, because I have a personality that enjoys
vices
and excessive vice. Like if I'm going to have one beer, might as well have 60 beer.
Right.
Like it's a ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
And if I'm not drinking, then you don't have to worry about me drinking. But if I'm going to have one, I might as well have 10,
Right.
And so like shrooms and things like weed and stuff, like, I don't know. I could sit here and make a case for why they're okay. And I can sit in here and make a case for why you shouldn't do it. And regardless, but when you get talking about your experiences, it's interesting. Because, like I think, what I always have wanted out of leadership, out of media, is to put two people around a round table like we're doing right now, and have similar but different ways of viewing the world. So you just walk through all the prophets. And I was like, well, one thing I would challenge you on, and not challenge you on, the only thing I would change is I just put Jesus is God. Jesus is the ultimate prophet. Jesus is the guy. And that's the only thing I would change. But I also sit and I sit and I stare at you and I go, what always amazes me is I sit and I listen to Faisal, and this goes for a lot of different people, folks. Like, man, they are well thought. They have put a lot of thought into their thoughts. They've
or they're just confused.
And no, and I go,
possible.
how did they get to a different conclusion than me? Right? So like where did we start? We started with Muslims and Christians, right? And how things are getting split in our society. Yeah. And one of the things I thought a while back, but when I listened back to our conversation, I'm like, nah, but Faisal's got a different handle on that. So I always thought, okay, Jews think, so we're talking Abrahamic religions. Jews think Jesus is the false Messiah.
They don't have a false Messiah figure. I think they just see him as an imposter.
Okay. But isn't he said he was the Messiah, so isn't that a false Messiah?
Did those Israelites that rejected Christ say something about his Messiah status other than he's not the one that we were promised? I don't know. This isn't a question. It's not a challenge.
No.
Because I don't know.
Now I'm thinking, this is where I'm like, man, this is where I need 10 in a day, and I'm, and like 5 different guys sitting around.
Totally. Well, there's 4 open chairs, man. If you want to come back and with some heavier firepower.
Yeah, well, I'm not
free.
the heavy firepower, am I, folks? I'm racking my brain of the stories I've read. And like they ask him if he is the Messiah.
Oh yeah, they ask him if he is the Messiah, right?
And he says, "I am."
Yes.
So
and they say,
don't
"No,
follow,
you're not."
Yeah, right. Which means he's the false Messiah. I guess I'm adding in the thought process.
Okay, I see what you're saying. So the reason I say that they don't have a false Messiah figure is because, to my understanding, the false Messiah or Antichrist narrative is only introduced through Christianity and Islam. I don't believe the Torah ever, but again, I don't know enough.
But I see what you're getting. Okay, so I always put as the Jews think he's the false Messiah.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
More just like today, they would never see Jesus as God. That is
Yeah.
no.
No, I get it the way you're saying
Christians look at Jesus, he is God,
it now.
and Muslims as he's a prophet.
Yeah. A very
So-
special prophet.
And I'm like, how on earth can you make those three go together when one thinks he isn't who he says he is? Christians believe in exactly what he says he is. And Muslims, yeah, you're a special guy, but you're not the guy.
Yeah. So, again, going back to our first conversation 2 years ago, I said I was absolutely shocked that Judaism teaches about this concept, the Erev Rav, the Riff Raff, and whatnot. And you asked me, so why does that shock you, Faisal? And I said, because it opens the door wide open
For a false Messiah.
for them to have made a mistake. For those Israelites who rejected Christ
Is that
to
what
have
you
made a
said?
mistake in rejecting. That's what I hoped to have gotten across. If I said it in as clean, in as clearly as that, then maybe I didn't say it as that clearly.
Now we're both
2
gonna
years
go back
ago.
and listen and find out exact. But regardless, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so that's what I meant to say by this whole Erev Rav thing that the Jews talk about, not very frequently and not very openly, because I think it gets them into an uncomfortable position. When I learned about that and I heard a rabbi talk about it and explain it, I was like, oh my goodness, this means that you could, as a Jewish individual, conclude that you'd made a mistake all the way back then, 2,000 years ago. And there are a number of Jewish people who have arrived at that conclusion. The most prominent name that I've come across is a man. I went to the University of Waterloo for undergrad, and I came across his name because he was he lectured at the University of Waterloo, or he taught at the University of Waterloo for a brief period, but he's an American. And if I'm not mistaken, he was in the field of physical chemistry. James Turk, I believe, is his name. Can't remember what he calls himself, as a Jew who believes Christ was the Messiah. But there is, and it's probably a very small group, but there's a group of Jews who've concluded for themselves after thoughtful reflection that those Israelites that rejected Christ made a mistake and that Christ was the guy that they were promised. So I think that door is open. Like, if guys as intelligent and as prolific as, I'm calling him James Turk. Please don't quote me on that. I could be getting that name wrong. See if I can't find the correct name. If I'm incorrect, find the correct name for you so you can put it in show notes. I'll do a little bit of research tonight. But if guys as prolific and he was, I don't know if he won the Nobel Prize or if he was nominated for the Nobel Prize in chemistry or physical chemistry, whatever it was. So this is not small potatoes we're talking about. We're talking about a powerful mind who's thought about it, reflected upon it, researched it, and arrived at that conclusion. Was he right? Was he wrong to conclude that? I'll leave that to other people. I'm just saying the door is open. Some people have walked through it and concluded what they've concluded. So that speaks to the Jews. Then you've got Christians who say he is God. And I got a question for you, because this confuses me as a Muslim, because I've heard.
Man, now you're about to ask a guy, and I might not have an answer. Give her.
Yeah, so you've got Christianity teaches about the Holy Trinity, right? The Father, the Son, and the Spirit.
Holy Spirit. Yeah.
The Holy Spirit, right? So how do you go from the Trinity, which is the Father, and then calling Christ God? Because I grew up always hearing Christ is the Son of God. How did Christ become God?
Well, maybe I'm saying it wrong.
No, but you're not the only one I've heard say it. I've heard others say it as well. And it's like, well, how did we get here? Because not that I was a religious scholar when I was little, but I was thinking and listening to this stuff, and it's like, okay, this is what the Christians believe. I get it. And then I tried to figure out what Islam was saying, and then I tried to later on really get into what the Jews were saying. So it's an open question. We don't have to answer it today. Let's not try and explore it. But that's
well, I
a
tell you
point
what
that
would be
confuses me.
fun is like to get a group of guys in the circle of contemplation, because I'm like, I know from the Christian side, I certainly know a couple of guys that would be a lot of fun to have in on the conversation.
Yeah.
And if you found a way to have a Jewish scholar or have your pick, like somebody who is open to the conversation, it'd be a lot of fun. It would, Faisal.
I would have a ton of fun with something
know,
like that.
I don't. I guess in my brain, like, I don't know how much I've talked about this, but like, with Jesus, I just don't worry about the Holy Trinity and the makeup of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not something to dwell on and say, did we get it right or wrong? It's just like, whatever, it'll get figured out in the end. And one thing we talked about this in the first podcast, is what is the Quranic term for Christians? It's an-Nasara, the allies.
An-Nasara?
A-N hyphen Nasara, Nesara, I guess is how you'd spell it.
An-Nasara.
An-Nasara. Un is the, basically. Nasara means those who fight with you, who struggle with you, who, in English, allies. The allies.
How is it possible the Muslims have that term, and yet where we sit in 2026?
Oh, because I think we've been screwed around with for centuries. I think we've been screwed around with. You can talk to Craner about it, because Craner has done some degree of, digging around and figuring out of how, it was, I can't remember if he said it was an MI6 or a CIA initiative to really corrupt the Quran, to try and corrupt the Quran. And, they have these madrasas, religious schools, and the Wahhabis and this and that, whatever, and really just try and corrupt Islam. And it to some extent weren't able to corrupt the Quran itself. And I can explain why.
I've had on the podcast, sorry, Faisal, that have talked about the extreme people who follow every word of the Quran, believe in violence, and that they should impose their will and kill all the infidels on the planet, and Christians fall into that. And what you're saying contradicts that, like...
Yeah, it contradicts it because, I don't think they've really tried to learn it. So, a lot of people will cite, there's a particular passage where it says, even the rocks will call out to the Muslims, in this end times sort of thing. Even the rocks, the boulders will cry out to the Muslims. There's a Jew hiding behind me, kill the Jew. Okay, fine, it says that, but can we just not take a 10-word, a single phrase, and say, well, this is the meaning of Islam? Like, can we find the context of this whole discussion from which you're pulling one sentence and saying Islam teaches all this evil? So again, going back to our first conversation, what Islam teaches is it warns the Muslims against taking as friends and allies those Christians and those Jews who are friends and allies of each other. Why would it say that? It says that because the way Islam teaches is the fundamental difference between a Jew and a Christian is the rejection versus the acceptance of Christ. They were both Israelites to begin with. They were all one group of people to begin with. They all suffered the same history. They were promised during captivity in Babylon. The Israelites were promised, you will receive a Messiah. Okay, some time passes. They end up back in the Holy Land. Along comes this individual, Jesus Christ, who when interrogated, are you the Messiah, blah, 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 however it all went, said, yes, I am he who was promised to you all that time back in Babylon. Call it half, 50% rejected, 50% accepted. him. There's a fundamental defining difference between these two groups of people. How can they ally? How can they become friends and allies of each other? It's impossible. It's taking your, to use it's not the most appropriate phrase, but it's the phrase that comes to mind. How do you take your blood enemy and say, yeah, let's work together for a common cause? That doesn't make sense. There's something, short circuits in my brain when I try and accept that. And so Islam says, take not as friends and allies those Jews and those Christians who have decided to come together and form some sort of collusion, cooperation, conspiracy together, who conspire together. It doesn't say hate all Jews and be the enemies of Jews. It doesn't say hate all Christians and be the enemies of Christians and kill them off. How could it say that? How could Islam teach that, whereas at the very same time Islam teaches in the Quran, again, don't ask me for citations because I don't memorize this stuff, but I could look it up if I had a computer in front of me or my phone. It does teach, feel free to marry the Jews. Feel free to marry Christians. Intermarriage between Muslims and Christians, Muslims and Jews is fully allowed. It's permissible. It's not a sin. How can that be allowed and not be a sin, whereas at the same time it says, guess what? You're supposed to kill the Christians and you're supposed to kill all the Jews. Kill all the Christians and kill all the Jews so that you win. Obviously, it doesn't make sense.
Well, the only way it would make sense is if you were trying to get rid of those ways of thinking, so you breed it out.
Yeah.
Under that train of thought.
Yeah, but how do you marry a Jew and marry a Christian? Like and it's not, you're not allowed to. It's not your duty nor your prerogative to convert them away from their religions.
Yeah,
I have an uncle. My dad's brother was married to a Christian woman. She remained Christian.
Not because I know zero about the Quran, right?
Yeah.
One of the things I get to see on the podcast is like trends, the way people think, and one of the things against Iran, to bring it to where maybe current events are, is Iran is the global leader in terrorism. They have a population that is going around and raping and pillaging the world. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic, but or maybe oversimplifying, that the Muslims are spreading their thoughts across the world, and as Christians, you need to stand against it. Once again, I'm now oversimplifying it, but that's the oversimplification that's been, talked about on the podcast is, I just had, now this is a while back. I didn't just have, this is a while back, a woman talking about how most Muslims, like most Christians, don't live by their faith. They actually don't.
Most Muslims don't live by their faith.
Correct.
Yeah.
They say they're Muslim, but they actually don't pick up the book and do what it says. As most Christians say they're Christians, but don't pick up the book and do what it says.
Yeah.
And what she was talking about was, Muslims at their core, if they picked up the book and lived by what the Quran says, they do extreme things. And I called them extreme. And it was another guy who said they're not extreme. They're just Muslims. They're believing what their book tells them to go and do, even if that's violent things. And what I've always found, enjoyable of talking to you, Faisal, is, you're giving a different thought process onto that conversation. It's always, it just seems like they're, even if I say they're extreme, it's like, no, they're just living by their faith, but their faith completely contradicts Christianity. Where you come in and you're like, that's not true at all. They call them...
I don't see it. So, Nick was here, as I told you last week.
Sure.
We were up in the kitchen. I think, I don't know what we were. I think my wife was preparing dinner. We were just sitting around having a glass of wine, nibbling on some cheese. And Nick looks out in the backyard, squints a little bit, and he goes, what the heck? What the heck is that? He's pointing at my birdhouse that I've got up. I'll show it to you later.
Sure.
I was like, yeah, it's a birdhouse. He's like, it's got a cross on it. I'm like, yeah, it's a church. It's like, I'm surprised you'd have I can't remember exactly how he phrased it. Forgive me, Nick, if I'm misrepresenting the way you phrased it. But he said, I'm surprised you'd have that in your backyard. I'm like, Why wouldn't I? You've heard me talk about it extensively. I have a tremendous admiration for Christianity and what it teaches. I don't think it gets 100% necessarily right, but at the same time, I don't think it's like flat out wrong. So I was going back to the An-Nasara thing. I didn't finish the thought. Islam calls the Christians the allies. They are your allies, right? But this was at a time Islam was revealed well after Christianity had, according to Islam, mistakenly divided God into these three things, including the Son of God, Christ being the Son of God. So what does that tell you? Islam, what it tells you, to a logical, deductively reasoning, rational mind, it teaches you that Islam does not look at the Christians and say, well, they call him the Son of God, therefore they're evil and they need to be eliminated. It says, okay, maybe not the Son of God. This is why we are teaching you it's not the Son of God, but they are your allies. They got way more right than they ever got wrong. And, one needs to understand, where people are coming from, and I'll go back to the Jews and why they rejected Christ, right? And the Christians would have had their own reasons for calling Jesus the Son of God. And I can understand why they might think of him as the Son of God, right? I get it. I don't agree with it in technical terms, but in the essence and the spirit of what it means to call him the Son of God, I get it. And I see why you might, with the limitations of your language, might end up saying, well, he's the Son of God. I get it. It doesn't mean he was like the seed and the offspring necessarily. This is where my head's at. I'm not saying this is what the Christians teach. You go back to the Jews the Israelites, who rejected Christ and therefore became defined as the group called the Jews. These are a people who endured tremendous oppression and suffering and, their test as the chosen people of God. I mean, being the chosen people wasn't a gift. Not the way I see history. This was a real challenge. I mean, the reward was big for being able to follow the true and narrow path. But being chosen wasn't necessarily, guess what, you're blessed. No, man, it was going to be hard work. And so they endured a lot, these people. And they got out of Babylon. They got back to the Holy Land. Along comes this guy who says, guess what, I'm your Messiah. It's like, well, why are we still being ruled over by the Romans? Why is life hard if you're our Messiah? Well, guess what? What they were told was, you're going to receive your Messiah twice. He's going to come first as a humble servant, persecuted, this, that, and the other, and then he'll come back as your, your savior, your king. Now, I'm probably mishmashing it a bit. I'm not a Christian. You could clean up what I just said, but I don't think in fundamental terms I got it wrong, right? It was taught that this guy's going to come to you 2 times, right? Well, they were like, well, if you're our Messiah, man, you got to make life better. You're not making life better, so I reject you. Were they right to do it? Were they wrong to do it? I believe they were wrong to do it. But one can understand maybe where they were coming from. Can we open our hearts enough to understand those who commit wrongs might be coming from a point that we can wrap our heads around? But it requires us to open our hearts to get there, and that's pretty challenging for a lot of people.
That's COVID in a nutshell.
Yeah. So then, yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you take it from something so abstract,
yeah,
not that the religions we're talking about is abstract, but like, I'm no scholar. I sit here and I go, I've said this lots. I don't need to be proven that Christ is real. I just know he's real. There's very few things I'm that firm of belief in.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same token, I sit across from Faisal and I go, Faisal is a well-read man that has done well in life, and I sit and I listen to you, and I go, I don't get the sense you're trying to lead me astray. You're trying to explain your thoughts. And I go, it's really interesting. I just find it fascinating. And one of the things I love about a podcast is you get to explore these things. But you go, can't we just open our hearts to understand how a part of the population went, you're not what I wanted. I wanted the sword to come in and throw off the yoke that has been placed, this burden upon us by the Romans.
Yeah.
It's funny, if you bring that to sometime we all know, COVID, and you think of the fear that was put on all of us, and the planning and the pressure and the media and the propaganda, and just stack it all on, and the fear of losing your job and everything. And yet we still don't have family members we talk to because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Still to this day.
Still to this day. And you go, well, like you wanna really embrace the teachings of Christ. It's like doing to others as you'd have them doing to you.
Yeah.
And
it's really hard. Like if you really want to live into that, it is so
100%.
hard.
You have to take out all the emotion.
Yeah. 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 And it really comes down to that line I said, open up your heart. But man, that is not an easy thing to get people to do, or even to do for yourself.
You got to witness Cornerstone this year, right?
Yeah.
And when I watch it back, I was like, man, I was annoyed by the end because I'm watching this beautiful community, this group of human beings that I've said it multiple times, and I'll just keep saying it. I was walking through, and I'm like, man, some of my favorite people are here. Like, this is just super cool.
I remember you saying that. Yeah.
Now, do I know all 700? No, I do not. And if I'm honest, that number still shocks me a little bit.
And me, having gone to the first one, which wasn't even called Cornerstone.
Right, and there was 140 of us there.
Yeah.
Right, when you think about it.
Yeah.
This year, it was strange to me because it's the first time I'd ever seen people just upset with people.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just Iran. I pointed to Iran. It was a whole bunch of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It was Israel. It was all these different things that are constantly bombarding us. It was all these different things clashing. And I've struggled with it. I think people think I don't know what they think I spend my time doing, but I sit and I stew on that. I see. Now I had Luongo on. He's the only virtual interview I've done on the trip. Supposed to be. I was hoping it was going to be him and Alex. If I'm honest.
Oh yeah, I tuned into that episode. Yeah.
And he talked. What I wanted to talk about is no country is a monolith, and we went all over the place. But the no country is a monolith is like, well, no group of people is a monolith. No Cornerstone Forum community is a monolith. We're not all going to think the same.
Yeah.
And I was probably naive to think that's the way this was going to play out for the longest time.
Yeah.
And so the no country is a monolith idea really struck me as like, that makes a lot of sense. But then the question becomes, so how do you hold a group of people that you really, really enjoy their train of thinking? But they're all coming with strong beliefs. They've thought about it really well. They don't just come in willy-nilly. They have put their time and effort into this, and that doesn't make sense. Well, I'm going to argue it. How do you hold something like that together?
I think it's a false expectation not expectation is not the word, ambition, ideal, to try and hold it all together. Nature doesn't work that way.
You don't think you can hold it together?
I don't think so, no. And not when you're getting to numbers like 700, You had a Muslim in the group. I don't know if there were other Muslims. You had Christians. I don't know if you had Jews in the group. You had farmers. You had business people. You probably had people,
there was
financiers.
Jews. Yes, there was Muslims. Yes, there was Christians.
I
know that for a fact.
So we're talking about religious backgrounds, and probably Hindus and Buddhists, and then you got the different professional backgrounds. Then you got the people who lived here and grew up under that. How do you glue them all together? You can't. I mean, I think it's wrong to put that burden upon yourself to look at it and go, okay, this happened because I did something wrong or what. No, man, that's nature. That's just how it works. Actually, I won't go too deep down into this because then we'll go off on a tangent. But,
Faisal, it's what we do.
It's what we do. No, I don't want to.
We went off on a lot of tangents in the first one.
Yeah, but I'll just touch upon it, right? So the world is entropic. The universe is entropic, right? If you don't put the energy into something, disorder will, that force is always there of breaking apart and getting disorderly or whatever, decay or whatever. If you don't put the energy into it, you can't pull it back together. So that force of randomizing, because that's what decay really is, it's the randomization at a molecular atomic level, right? You can't expect you as one individual, the founder and the organizer of Cornerstone Forum, to be able to tie that all together and bind it and keep it when that internal tendency to randomize, that entropic force, right, to constantly exist. You're only one man. There's only 24 hours in a day, and you got to sleep for hopefully 8 of them. Spend time with your family. No, I wouldn't hold it against yourself. I wouldn't berate yourself. I wouldn't even dwell on it for a second. It's an evolving organism, is the way I would look at it. There may be those individuals. Let's say you run this for 20 years, 30 years, whatever the number is. There may be the odd, tiny handful of individuals that were there from iteration 1 to iteration 30 at the very end. But I don't think you're going to find any more than a handful. People will come, people will go, ideas will evolve. It's all just natural ebb and flow of the way life actually works. I think what you should focus more on is the fact that you're able to convince all these different people to come from all these different places around the country, across the continent, around the world. If I'm not mistaken, you had some people from Europe.
Yeah, we had Germany this year.
Yeah.
We had Cayman Islands.
Yeah, you do that thing at the end, like who came the furthest, right? So, what's elucidating about that is the crowd, how far your net is being cast that brings these people together. I would spend more time, enjoying the fact that you've put something together meaningful enough that draws the people, convinces the people, yeah, I'm going to go to Calgary, Alberta in March from the freaking Cayman Islands. That's the worst choice you can make if you're living in the Cayman Islands in March, to go up to Calgary, Alberta. But, there was a reason for it. Who cares if that division happens? It's only going to, with greater success will come, if success is defined by the size and the draw of the... There's
no way you can...
There's no way. There's no way. The most you should expect of yourself and of the group, I would say, is that the discourse can be civil. We will disagree. If we don't disagree, in fact, there's probably something wrong happening. You're talking about groupthink. You don't want the groupthink. You want the people to come together and say, well, I see it a little bit different. Faisal says this. Oh my God, I've never heard somebody say that before. You want that type of dynamic to exist, but you want to have it happen in a civil manner. You don't want people to start cursing each other off. You don't want people to say, well, I can't get up on stage with that guy because he's, insulting me, or I can't sit at that table 23 because... And
I tell you what, that's what's happened this year.
I know what happened, which is why I'm saying it, and that's what's wrong.
So at the core, I just interviewed Tom Marazzo, I guess, for the people listening, it'll be the episode before this.
Yeah.
And he was talking about core principles. And maybe the Cornerstone just needs to have a couple of core principles.
I would 100% agree. It's what allowed me to do what I did with the business that I acquired off my dad's estate, family business, but you don't inherit things, you got to buy things. Anyway, that's what allowed me to change the trajectory of that business. Here are some core values. We're all different people. We're, the team, the company, we're all different people. We have different backgrounds, different ideas, whatever. I just need us pulling in the same direction. And we're going to pull in that direction on the basis of these core principles, these core values. This is the roadmap. Here we are today. This is where I want to get to. This is This is how you color within the lines. This is how you stay on the road and don't veer off the road. So mission, vision, values. And, you know, you don't need to take it quite that far, but I think a set of abiding principles is perfect. Think what you think, have your ideas, disagree, but this is what defines this community, right? If you can't abide by these core principles, these core values,
Probably
we'll
not the
ask you
place for
please
you.
to find other better ways to spend your time than to come here.
Sticking on your business for a second, you
Yeah.
know, this is something we've never talked about.
No.
Right? You built a business and you talked about, I want to go from here and I want to get all the way up there.
Yeah.
That like simplistic, here's where I want to go, makes complete sense to me. But how did you keep your team and everybody
Pointed in that direction.
pointing in that direction and not being able to, I assume not everybody could see your vision. I assume that they, you know, wanted to go a little bit over here and a little bit over there and you had to keep pulling them back and it's like, no, it's right there. That's where we're heading.
Yeah.
All this other stuff is noise or it's a distraction or it's going to pull us off the course.
Yeah.
How did you keep everybody going that way?
Well, first to articulate very clearly what that destination was, you know, and you can't be too specific because you can't hem yourself in so tightly that you don't allow yourself to be able to adapt to changing circumstances. The environment will always change, but you need to. So it's a balancing act of explaining it clearly enough that people can understand. Okay, this is where Faisal wants to take us, but not to do it so specifically that, you know, one misstep and you failed. You know what I mean? So you got to articulate a very clear vision. You're doing road trips with your family. You know what it's like. You got to tell the kids and the wife, this is where we're going. By the end of the day, you've given it some definition. You put the timeline on it. By the end of the day, we're going to be here. We're going to take our breaks over here. I expect people to not start biting each other or screaming at each other or howling at the top of your heads. You know, you want to take a pee break, you let me know in advance. And so you're establishing the rules of the road as well. So the rules of the road, once you've established the vision, the destination, here are the rules of the journey, right? And that's the core values. That's how you know you're doing it the right way, right? If we're being dishonest, speaking in corporate speak, if we're being dishonest in order to get to the destination, we're not doing it the right way. So honesty is a core principle. If we're, shipping shoddy quality stuff out the door in order to get to the destination, we're not doing it the right way. Quality is a core value. Whatever. These are the rules of the road. This is how we know that we haven't veered over the center line or gone off into the ditch, right? So destination, rules of the road, vision, mission, and values. Oh, sorry. No, so the values aren't the rules of the mission is the rules of the road. This is how we're going to get to the destination, right? So my vision for the company was basically to be the world's leading and dominant supplier of, it's called high voltage insulator coatings. Don't need to explain what that means. It was a product. It was a technology. We're going to be the world's leading manufacturer and supplier of this technology. And so then the mission is how we're going to do that, right? We're going to we're going to innovate. We're going to deliver on time. We're going to have such and such reject rate or quality control success criteria, et cetera, et cetera. This is the mission. This is how we're going to get there. And then this is how we're going to play along together as we do it. That's the values part. So vision, mission, and values. And again, for a thing that you're doing, you don't need it all. You just really need the values part. Because who knows what the ultimate destination of Cornerstone Forum is? I don't know if that could be articulated or should be articulated. The mission, you're hemming yourself in too much. You're not allowing yourself to have exploratory conversations and some disagreements. But what's really important is this is how we play along together. The values are important, and I think Cornerstone Forum could very much benefit from something like that. And you don't want like a dozen of them. You need 3, 5, maybe 6. But you need to explain them, right? Like, so it should be things that are easy to remember. So going back to corporate speak, quality, honesty, integrity, teamwork, whatever, right? But I'd have a paragraph underneath. It's like, what does honesty mean at my company, at this company? What does integrity mean at this company, right? So there's got to be a little bit of fine print underneath the headline words, but something that's not overly complex that people can go through and go, yeah, that makes sense. This is a group that I want to be a part of. And it gives you something to point to and say, well, Mr. Such and Such, this is what we aspire to be, and you really don't seem to be wanting to play along by these values. Maybe your time is better invested elsewhere. So I think it could benefit from that, and then I wouldn't hold it against myself that people have differing opinions. I mean, that's kind of the point of it.
It's kind of the point. Yeah, it's kind of the point of making worlds collide.
Yeah.
Of trying to get people out of their echo chambers.
Yeah.
Probably a false sense of belief that we'd all see the world the same way.
Yeah.
Or very naive, as you move through it.
Yeah.
Before I let you off here,
yeah,
I'm like, we haven't really, we've maybe touched briefly on Iran. We've been kind of, once again, all over the place, which is great.
Yeah.
But, do you want to have anything on Iran? Do you want to have anything on Putin or Russia, Ukraine? Is there things there, Faisal, that you want to make sure, or that we just chat about?
Oh, well, we could go into the Putin thing. I don't know if it's, we've been on for a good long time and we'll get deep into the eschatology weeds. The Iran thing, I think I've said really what I'm looking out for, that things are yet to get worse. Let's not rest on any laurels here. Things feel like they've come to a détente. I'm skeptical of it. I'm not hoping for war, but I'm sort of expecting that the worst is yet to come. What else? Ukraine. I view what's happening in the Middle East and what's happening in the Ukraine vis-a-vis Russia are intimately tied to each other. Do we want to unpack that? I don't know if we need to unpack that right now. Maybe we'll save it for a third conversation down the road. I think what's ridiculously fascinating is the history of Russia. You remember Tucker's interview of Putin?
Yes.
What is it, 2 years ago now already?
At least 2 years ago now.
At least already 2 years, maybe 3. So Putin sat down and gave him this big, long, boring history lesson. It's actually far less boring than sitting there and listening to him. I felt bored listening to him, I'll admit it. But if you get into it a little bit more deeply and understand some of the origin story of Russia and the history of Russia and the Caucasus, you're like, oh, that crafty little guy, that little Vladimir Putin was essentially explaining, without crossing any red lines, how Russia really, how it has come to be that Russia identifies itself as what's the Russian word? I'm forgetting the Russian word. The force that acts to hold the Antichrist at bay. What? Yeah, that's really, when you get between the lines of what he was saying, he was explaining how Russia has arrived at that identification for itself, why it identifies itself that way. So you're getting into the Kievan Rus, you're getting into the lineage of the family that ended up with Sviatoslav the Great, who was the one who put the nail in the coffin of the Khazarian Empire. Then you get into the history of Khazaria, which started, plus or minus 650. No, sorry. Yeah, plus or minus 650 AD.
And is that the same as Khazarian? Or am I...
Yeah, same thing. Khazaria would be, or the Khazar people, Khazarian Empire, Khazarian people, Khazaria, I believe, is what they would have called themselves as a nation, right? The way we call ourselves Canada, they would have called themselves Khazaria. That's the way I understand it, but
Sure.
we're talking about the same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah, and so where does the mafia part come from? Well, so that's an interesting thing to unpack. So what am I doing these days? Because as we've said, I'm retired and whatnot, and I spend my life as an indoor cat. What does indoor cat do? So it dawned upon me that I don't really understand, I don't really know this story behind Khazaria, the history of Khazaria, the Khazarian Empire. I hear tidbits about it, but somebody on Tucker's podcast correctly pointed out not too long ago, can't remember which guest it was, that the first 1,000 years of history following Christ has largely been just swept under the rug and buried, right? So this is pre-Crusades, because Crusades roughly 1100s, I think, is when it started, plus or minus. So you're talking basically from the Christ to the Crusades have largely been kind of like, not even whitewashed, just suppressed is the word I'm looking for. And the history of Khazaria falls smack at the end of that, right? From 650 to roughly, let's call it 970, something like that. 300 years of history, of relatively important history, because it actually emerges as part of a narrative in Islam. Even though Islam, the Prophet Muhammad passed away in 632 AD, it talks about, there is in the Quran a story about a character named Dhul Qarnayn who acts against these tyrants and oppressors who live just north of the Caucasus. Lo and behold, the Khazarian Empire extended from basically the Volga River to the east, all the way on its western borders. Wouldn't have gone into Poland, I don't think. They'd gone a little bit west of Kiev. That was its stomping grounds. From the south, so that's east to west. South, the southern border of their empire that they did cross in order to tyrannize the people south of them, was the Caucasus Mountains. And then the northern border, I don't know what it would have been, the northern boundary. I don't know if it even matters. But anyway, so that's three sides. That was their stomping grounds. And you get to Sviatoslav the Great, who came out of Kiev, the Kievan Rus, and vanquished. He put the final nail in the coffin of the Khazarian Empire. And then you understand the history of Khazaria and how they chose to adopt a religion for themselves, because these people, they were too enterprising and too entrepreneurial and too much like a herd of cats. And you talk about, how do we glue together all these people at Cornerstone? Well, that's, whoever was leading Khazaria was like, oh, how do I glue all these people together? When we fight in unison to oppress and dominate and tyrannize all these people, we do really well, but man, are these all a bunch of entrepreneurial individuals who want to strike off in their own direction. What's some sort of glue that I can use to bind them? And it's like, well, it's probably religion. We were talking about, you got a sense of purpose, you got a sense of meaning in your life. You can pull in a certain direction with all the other people. That's kind of what religion ends up doing, right? It gives people a sense of purpose, meaning, a destination. What is their life about? So he's like, yeah, we probably need a religion. Well, he looked at the three major religions in the area. There was Islam, Christianity, and Judaism. It's like, well, I'm not going to choose the Muslims because they've already got a burgeoning, growing empire. I don't know what it would have been called, whatever the caliphate was at that time. I'm not going to misquote history. So they're doing really well. If we adopted Islam, it's not like the Muslims are going to say, yeah, guess what? You get to be the rulers of our people now, because they want to oppress and dominate. They want to be the chief of the tribe. They're just like, well, we can't adopt that. We're going to just fall under them. That's not going to work for us. Can't adopt Christianity. Similar idea. These guys are, large, established, successful. They're not going to allow us to be the chief of the tribe. So, well, what about Judaism? Okay, Judaism isn't very big. It's down there to the south, talking about the Holy Land. It's well past these Caucasus Mountains down there. They're not like, warring people per se. They're not expansionists, it doesn't seem. Let's take that one on. Okay, so we're going to call ourselves the Jews, or we're going to call ourselves Jewish people. Okay, so what did that mean? How do you become? You can't just say you're you're Jews all of a sudden. You got to learn the thing, right? What is it? So they would send their emissaries down to the Holy Land and come back with, newly minted rabbis. And so these are people who chose to identify as Jews without having any Jewish history behind them. They didn't live the traditions. They didn't live all that stuff that the Israelites went through. It wasn't part of their lore, their history, the stories told around the fire. You know what I mean by that. It wasn't part of their culture. In other words, right? So you
could. I mean, this is probably a terrible example, but it'd be like somebody immigrating to a new country and going full on, I'm Canadian, but not actually having anything to base that on other than you're in the country now.
Yeah.
You're talking about taking on a religion, but having no basis on the history of that and things that the ancestors or even you as a person up to that point had lived through.
Yeah, exactly. And you don't live now amongst those people.
Correct. You're off in your own spot.
You're north of the Caucasus. The Holy Land, Jerusalem, is all the way down there, made even more distant by the fact that you're probably traveling on horseback and stuff and not hopping on a flight to get there, right? It's even more remote and distant, but lo and behold, here you are. So you send these emissaries down, they come back, newly minted rabbis, and you can understand how that isn't necessarily healthy for the core that is Judaism. This is a potentially corrupting influence to this religion that they've chosen to take on for themselves, right? So anyways, long story long again. What am I doing these days? I'm trying to unpack and understand for myself what is the history, how did it happen, why did it happen necessarily, etc. And
you haven't landed on the Khazarians control everything?
No, and I don't know if that's where my reading's going to get me. So first of all, there's 2 textbooks out there. Some guys took it upon themselves to answer the same questions that I'm asking myself. I don't know when they were written, but man, they were hard to come by. They were listed on Amazon, unbelievably, but it took, a couple months for them to get here. One took 8 weeks. Another one took around 10 weeks. So I don't even know how Amazon works, but somebody out there was like, yeah, I can find this book and I can sell it to you. So they dug it up and they eventually got it to me. And in the meantime, I was like, well, I got to hit while the iron's hot. And I'm intellectually curious now. Is there something I can get my hands on more quickly while I wait for these books to arrive? So I picked up a couple of books of historical fiction. Historical fiction's easy read because it's a story. Right, it's fiction, but it's rooted in history. So I was like, I can read this. I enjoy this type of thing. It'll give me the lay of the land, kind of, right? I'll understand maybe some sequence. So when I get into this super boring and dry textbook, I'll be able to digest it a little bit more easily. So anyways, I'm only through getting through the first historical fiction. I'm a slow reader, as it turns out. And it's fascinating. It's, what I said about Putin and that crafty little guy with his preamble of history with Tucker. He was sending out a really potent message. And then, this understanding that I've developed of, you can't just say, I'm going to adopt that religion. I'm going to be here, plus or minus on the other side of the world, right? And be faithful to the core of what that religion actually teaches. There's going to be, I call it a corrupting effect. Some people might take exception to me using the word corruption, but it's going to have some sort of mutating effect, let's say, on what that religion is. Now, what has happened to these people? When Sviatoslav the Great put the final coffin, did he kill off every last Khazarian? No, he didn't. They persisted as a people. And they persisted as Jewish people because that's the religion they took on 300 years later, whatever it was. Probably not 300 years, maybe 150 years after they adopted it. These guys still existed, right? They existed when the Mongols started the Mongol hordes invaded Europe. And they've persisted probably till today. Like, no one's gone off and tried to kill off these people. So, this is the stuff that I'm trying to piece together and understand, because it's a glaringly absent part of my understanding of world history, of human history, simply because it's never floated to the surface. It always seems to have been suppressed. And if, trying to get these textbooks and it being as long an exercise as it was is any form of evidence of how this stuff is not really allowed to just freely circulate.
Yeah.
There's,
Well, I'd be interested.
is there a reason behind its suppression? Maybe I'll piece something together and have yet another bigger aha moment. But it was pretty big already for me to go back to Putin's speech, pull up the transcript and go, oh, you skipped over the part. He skipped over the dad. And so Sviatoslav obviously had a father. He came from somewhere. So he skipped over Sviatoslav and Sviatoslav's father in his articulation of the history. He did the grandfather, great grandfather stuff. He did the Sviatoslav's kid. Why'd you skip these two guys? Well, I think that he understood that any inquiring mind who really wants to understand what I'm talking about will eventually piece it together for themselves. It's enough to talk about the preamble, the ancestors, and the successor. You'll fill in the gap and you'll understand what I'm getting at. And so that's, and one understands now why Putin's Russia has approached the Ukraine war the way he has, why it crushes their hearts to go ham, to go full tilt on Kiev. It's their origin. It's the home of their ancestors. It's from whence Russia emerged. Do you kill off? Do you bomb out your great-grandmother's home? Great-grandmother, the metaphor I'm getting at, right? Do you do that, or do you go, oh, let's see if we can't get there, more tactfully and accomplish? Now, of course, Putin's facing quite a bit of pushback internally. It's like, can't we take Iran as an example? Look at how successful Iran was fighting off two nuclear powers, America and Israel, and seemingly have emerged on top. And they did that in this short of period of time. What are we doing, Mr. Putin? Can't we do this a little bit better? So he's facing some internal pressure. It's not an enviable position that he's in, but, I'll go back to eschatology. It's quite possible that he is a fairly key eschatological figure in the way that Islam teaches eschatology. It may turn out that he's actually one of the key characters that Islam talks about. So yeah, there's a tremendous amount to talk about with Putin, but this is why I say, going all the way back, why the Ukraine-Russia situation is very, very intimately linked with what's going on in Iran. And, a guy like Alex Craner would agree with me, but he looks at it at a different layer. He looks at it from the layer of money, banking, collateral for debt, right? The only way you get to keep your debt-based monetary system is if you've got collateral for it. So Russia's got a bunch of resources. The Middle East has oil, etc. I'm like, not invalid, not wrong. But I believe that there's more to the story. I believe that there's much more to the story.
Well, I look forward to much more of the story on episode 3 whenever that happens. But Faisal, thanks for having me in your house and doing this.
Yeah, no, it was my pleasure, and thanks for having me on again. And welcome to little rural southwestern Ontario.